not on?
Little power button on the top.
And now we've shut them all off. And
Probably. You mean it's voice activated.
on channel
Do you
10.
want to call down? Are we on?
It is showing.
Yeah, we're on, yeah.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the December 14th Newmarket Planning Board meeting. Let's start by doing the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Are there any public comments on something that's not on the agenda? Hearing none, I'll close the public comment period at 7:01. Next is review and approval of the minutes of November 9th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Comments? Editorial? Nothing? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. I will abstain.
Me too.
Tim, Jeff, you weren't here? Yeah, you should abstain. Mikhail, you'll abstain also, I take it? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So first on the regular business agenda, Seacoast Materials, LLC. Chris and Chad Bennett, public hearing for an application for renewal of an excavation permit for the property located at 421 Wadley Falls Road, tax map R6, lot 2, in the B3 zone. No, that's fine. That's fine. Do we need to accept this application as complete? Seeing it's a public hearing? It's not a... Okay. So what is your recommendation? That we accept it as complete?
I think that according to the checklist that we have for the application, I believe it meets the requirements for the application to be heard tonight.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments, questions for Ms. Hardy on that? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to accept the application as complete. Is there a motion?
Can I just ask one question?
Sure.
Maybe it would be, I'm going to ask the question and maybe we table it. But my question is equipment storage allowed in that zone as a permitted use?
That's the next one.
Oh,
And it's a B3
sorry.
zone. And
Sorry.
Any
Okay.
warehousing and business
All right.
use is allowed in B3 zone.
Okay.
So the answer
I'm
would be
on the
yes.
wrong one. Thanks.
Sorry.
Is there a
Okay.
motion to accept the application as complete? Please, someone?
Yeah.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the application? Hearing none. Take the vote.
Is there going to be a presentation at all?
Yes,
This is
yes.
to
We
accept
just
it
this is
for
to accept the
review.
application for review. All those in favor of accepting the application for review, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Now we will open up the public hearing, and Chris and Chad Bennett here, or Chris or Chad Bennett here. Would one of you like to come up and just give us a brief, I guess, overview of history of what's going on in the last few years?
Yep, so a little bit of history in case anyone wasn't on the board. 3 years ago, we purchased the property from Wayne Rosa. Before we did that process, we came in for the renewal to make sure it was transferable. And at the last meeting 3 years ago that we had come to, because it's a 3-year permit, the board unanimously approved it to have everything transferred over from the reclamation plan to the site plan. And from then, I think Wayne pulled out a lot more material than we were pulling out. We're kind of in the process of organizing it now. There was 15,000 yards of boulders we've been trying to clean up, and we haven't got into too much excavating the material, but we're down there, cleaning it up at the moment to get it to where we want to have it.
Okay.
How much material have you excavated since you've taken over the ownership?
So I brought some numbers. So I could just give you a quick update. Like 2018, the year we bought it, but we didn't excavate any. We bought at the end of the season. The previous owner had almost 3,000 yards removed that 1 year. And then when we took it over in 19, we took out 666 yards. And 2020, 378. And 2021, 144 to date. So we haven't closed out this year yet, but we're not pulling out as much as he was. We're kind of spending a lot of time there organizing some of the material that was left behind.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions you guys have?
Yeah, I've got one.
Okay.
You have, as part of your application, I guess you have a plan here from Doucette Survey. That looks like you updated and signed and put your name on, which you can't do.
Okay.
You've got to, if you're going to present us a plan, it has to be
Well, I went to
original
the
and
planning
stamped.
office. That we hadn't done a lot of progress down there, so I talked with Diane, and she
Yep.
said that I wouldn't have to go back and have it all resurveyed because we really haven't changed anything down there except crush some of the rocks from bigger rocks to smaller rocks.
Right, and I'm not
Okay.
telling you have to have it resurveyed, but if you're going to use a plan from anybody, but in this case Doucette Survey, it's supposed to be stamped, right? And this is a progress print, so I mean I've seen oftentimes you hire somebody to walk the site and say, yeah, it's the same. It doesn't have to be a complete new survey necessarily, but
Okay.
that would be between you and whoever you hire to do that. All right, so that's my only issue with the whole thing is that it's not appropriate to take somebody's plan and mark it up.
Well,
And most lay people don't
me
know that.
signing it shows that I updated. It wasn't that.
Understood.
I
Understood.
went through it.
And I'm not saying you knowingly did something wrong or trying to do something wrong. It's just you can't do it. You just can't do it. So,
Okay.
so that's just my one comment. Does anybody else have anything else? Bill, you had your hand up.
So you described that you've been moving things around and sorting things out. Is that depicted here in some way?
The new piles. Before it was just one big rock pile and a couple of loam piles, and on that plan I depicted out where there's some new piles from sorting it out.
So no material has been brought on site from other sources?
Some loom has come in.
How much?
It came off the school when we did it. I don't know, maybe 5,000-6,000 yards.
Okay, because when you say you, I don't know that you use the term sold, but remove 140 yards or something.
That's only to
when,
do
when,
with sand.
When actually 7,000 came in and left, that's important information to share with the board.
Okay. Well, for the excavation permit in itself, those are the numbers that I have to file with you guys at the town. So that's just sand that was excavated from the site, because that's, a big portion of the permit. When the previous owner was there, they were moving out lots of sand. It was a huge
Yeah, I think the
25 acre
permit-
area that's been reduced.
I think your permit is for operation of your business. It's not specific to removal of sand. So if you're bringing material in, sifting it, whatever you're doing with it, sorting it, and then selling it, the board needs to be brought up to date with what's going on that pit.
When we purchased the pit from Wayne Rosa, I sat down with him and exclusively talked details about all the
Excuse me, sir.
reporting.
Would you just stand in front of the microphone? I'm sorry,
sorry.
so people at home will be able to
I'm
hear
Chris Bennett. I'm co-owner of the pit. When we purchased the pit, I exclusively sat down with Wayne Rosa and talked extensively about reporting, intent to excavate, went through all his past and previous reports he gave the state and the town and so on and so forth. And he specifically told me that any material that is imported into the site does not need to be reported as leaving the site. It's only the raw material that was native to the land that needed to be reported when it leaves. So that's the information I received, and that's what I believe Wayne did for how many years he owned the pit.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would recommend that you rely on the landowner's direction on how to meet the town's requirements. So talking with the planner is probably a good source there. Knowing that this is on the town's aquifer, bringing in material is something that is sensitive to the board.
Diane, was there something in the original permit in regards to that? Or
No,
under
but I know that
under
it
the
came
gravel
up from
regulations?
Time to time. I don't have anything that would reflect that. I do have the original
Yeah,
2003
I've got it at my
approved
office, too.
excavation plan that was done. And that's what we've been using as the basis for our approvals for the last 15 years since I've been here. And we've always referred back to the original 2003 plan
for excavation.
for excavation.
No, I'm
Right.
saying right within our
Yeah.
ordinance.
There's nothing in there about that.
Nothing in there about
Well, our ordinance
Limitations.
references,
material
on-
going in and out.
Limitations on what's brought into the
Yeah.
site. It's an approved activity, business activity in that zone.
Yep.
it's governed by the statute, and it's also governed by the regulations that speak to the aquifer.
This is not subject to the aquifer protection. We've gone around and around with legal counsel and attorneys. It was in effect before the town adopted the aquifer protection ordinance, so it is grandfathered from those regulations. I have legal correspondence in my file from the
I'm not
town
debating
council.
you, Diane.
I'm just trying to refresh everyone's memory, because we went around and around for many years on that, and we do have documentation on that score.
Okay. Thank you. Bill, do you have anything else?
Nope.
Can you, anybody else have any questions? Comments?
Was the site inspected by the town?
Yes, I sent out the inspection report. Did you not see it?
Yep.
I attached it, Mike. Yeah, I went out there with our new interim building official, Peter Rowell, who is a very experienced code enforcement officer, building inspector. And we always go out before the planning board reviews the renewal to do an inspection to make sure everything is in order. And the site was in pretty good condition. Both Peter and I agreed with that, and you have our report, we both signed that. So I think the town has certainly done our due diligence as far as following the town's excavation regulations. And it's the same protocol we've used since 2006, when I started working here for the town 15 years ago. It's the 5th one I've been through. Okay? Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, I have no issue with the operation or anything. I would just like to see an updated plan, to be honest with you. But what's the rest of the board thoughts? I have no problem reapproving this, but I think we should get and it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it needs to be done the right way, I guess. What's everybody think?
think, like you say, it definitely should be an approved plan, or an official plan, rather than just a hand-drawn comments, right?
Yeah, and it
Needs
doesn't have to be a real
something before.
expensive one, it just needs to
Right.
be, that's my take on
I
it.
think as the applicant stated, the challenge is, these are, what is it, every 3 years?
Correct.
So boards change, and like you said, 3 years ago, half of these members may have been here, but so you got a lot of new people. So our duty is to stay informed. So when you have, long-term, and 15 years this has been going on, the plans from,
2003, it's been more than that.
but the
18
plan
years.
set that you stated was dated 2015, so
Mhm.
7 years ago.
It was 2003 when the original plan,
Okay, so we're
Was
relying on a
engineered.
plan that says you're gonna do something in 2003.
but every year, every time they come in, and you were one part of that, Bill, you were one of the people who did a progress for Wayne Roser back in
Yeah, my name's all over
2012 and 2015.
Not
So
this one.
you know that definitely that's the protocol that's been
Right.
used. If the objection is that it wasn't done by a licensed surveyor, then
No,
I think
the-
the board is well within
You're
their.
putting words in my mouth.
I'd
No.
like to make that statement, and it's up to the board to make that decision, whether they want to have a updated plan that is professionally drawn up as a condition of approval.
I just speak to the regulation.
Sure.
So the regulation only requires the applicant, I'll call him, to provide a sketch and description of the locations.
Okay.
And also a sketch and description of existing and proposed roads, et cetera. So it's not requiring a licensed surveyor to do your
Right.
plan.
Can I add a comment also?
Yeah, absolutely.
So some of those new piles that are different from the last thing, it's a fluid thing, because in 6 months that pile could be gone, because we use it up.
Yep.
And there'll be a new pile. In its place, it could be something else, or it could be in a different part of the site. So it's, we're not talking about a mountain of dirt. Some of these quantities might be 300 yards of dirt, but I went around and I labeled where they were as a sketch, and then when we did the site walk, Diane and the building inspector saw that my sketch was accurate, and things were where it was. So I'm trying not to spend $500 to have a licensed surveyor come out and say, yeah, the circle where the pile of
Yeah.
loom is or the pile of rocks are is where they are. So I thought a sketch was a sufficient thing, because it's an updated thing. It's not a site plan to
Right.
build on. So
Well, I think
piles
based on
move
what-
all around.
I think based on what Val said, it doesn't need to be a surveyed plan, but
But it's something.
what
for
you
your
submitted
record.
is something with somebody else's name on it that
Right.
didn't give you
And I
authority
could-
to use
I
it.
could easily,
So
Okay.
change that.
that's all I'm looking for at this point.
So the surveyor who did that plan could give him authority to do so if they wanted to.
That's a private business decision. That's correct.
And is that often done for a fee?
Nothing gets done for nothing.
Okay.
But-
I just
so,
want to make
anyways.
sure I understand the.
What I did,
So I'm gonna-
basically took what you
Relationships
guys
of
had on
people here.
record,
Yes.
made a copy of it,
Yep.
and then just
I'm going to rescind what I had said before, because I wasn't aware until Val just said that we don't need an updated, all we need is a sketch.
It really just needs to meet the requirements of 3.01, the plan.
And what are the requirements of 3.01 specifically?
Name and address of the owner, the excavator if it's different, name and address signature of the person preparing the plan, the date, the bar scale, the north arrow, zoning district boundaries within 200 feet of the boundary project, the sketch and description of location and boundaries of the proposed and any existing excavations, existing vegetative buffers, area in square feet and acres, the location of existing building structures, septic systems and wells within 200 feet, the lot lines of all the lots with similar contiguous ownership of the subject parcel, the streets, driveways, intersections, rights-of-way, also easements within 200 feet, topography at contour intervals of 2 feet, all surface drainage patterns including wetlands and standing water, sketch and description of existing and proposed access roads including width and surface materials, and any other information that the board reserves the right under RSA 155E3 to be requested to make a useful informed decision.
So
So that's under the regulation, obviously, because it's not an ordinance. I believe that we as the planning board can, if the applicant requests, can waive any of those parts of this regulation.
And
Oh, go ahead.
I have consulted with John Radigan on that, and he agreed with me that, yes, we could grant waivers. And we have a waiver before the committee, the board tonight, to extend this for a 5-year permit.
I
Currently,
present that to
the
you.
requirement is 3 years.
So,
We have
White.
the authority
And
to-
I reviewed that with Mr. Radigan, and he was very clear that that was appropriate, especially given the situation with the pandemic and the economic impacts associated with that. That was a reasonable request.
so Val, what you read there though was basically a survey plan. You can't show lot lines and various
It's just-
distances
it's
unless
just-
you're a surveyor.
It's just a sketch of
Yeah, but I don't think there's any such thing. But we can waive that too. I mean, we can.
Right, that's
I mean,
my
I
point
think-
is,
yes.
we should be looking at a plan
I would-
that meets our regulation under 301.
Yes, yes, yes. So,
And also, from the perspective of we agree to grant this request for 5 years, we at least should have the more accurate base plan from which to start.
yep. Yep. All right, does anybody else have anything to say? Anybody in the public have any comments on this? Nothing? So, all right, so there's I don't know if everybody has had a chance to see the letter. They're requesting a waiver to approve this for 5 years instead of 3 years, which that makes sense to me. I don't know if there's anything magic about 3 years.
Yeah, there's no requirement for it to be a 3-year.
No, no.
Well, in our own regulations, as we showed, we do have these waivers for
Yeah.
that.
What are the requirements for reclaiming this gravel pit? And at what schedule shall that be done?
That's also in here. I think it actually falls
That's part,
under the
all of that is part of
It's
the
in there.
2003 reclamation plan.
Right, and
And if
I don't
there's
have that
been-
in front of me, so I'm
So
trying to
like a
figure out.
copy of it, Bill?
So here's the incremental reclamation.
This is our only signed plan, so I'd like to get that back, please.
So, Bill, to answer your question, 2.03, incremental reclamation. Except for excavation sites of operating that are operating stationary manufacturing plants, any excavated area of 5 contiguous acres or more, which is depleted of commercial earth materials, excluding bedrock or any excavation from which earth materials of sufficient weight or volume to be commercially useful, have not been removed for a 2-year period, shall be reclaimed in accordance with section 2.02 of the regulation.
Okay.
Within 12 months following the depletion or non-use, regardless of whether other excavations occurring on adjacent land in contiguous ownership. Reclamation plan, including reclamation timetable for the depleted areas within the reclaimed site, reclamation site, shall be submitted to the board for approval.
So the board's duty is to identify what has been excavated in the last 2 years or whatever, and has it or has it not been reclaimed? So are we reviewing that, and are we identifying whether it has or not?
I thought it was an area of over a certain acreage that had to be reclaimed immediately.
It's any excavated area of 5 contiguous acres or more,
5 contiguous acres or more.
but which is
Have-
depleted of
Right.
commercial earth
Have you
materials.
depleted any area of 5 acres or more
Oh,
in the
yeah.
last 3 years?
No.
I guess that's another way of saying the
No,
same.
and just to answer
Question.
another question, we have a bond with the town for $27,000 that is being held by you guys, that if for some reason in 2 years we do not continue our excavation, which we are continually doing now,
Yep.
that you guys can come in, use that money to reclaim
To
it.
reclaim, yep.
So, you know,
So, did I miss, is there an answer there?
so we
Is it
haven't
where it's
depleted any area yet to be reclaimed.
on that whole site?
Bill, most of the
Correct.
site's reclaimed.
Yeah, this,
90% of the site is,
Yeah, I'd
It's
say
already
20
reclaimed.
acres out of the 25 acres are completely lawn.
You
Okay.
have the plan in front of you, you should see that.
So
And-
we're
and they're not
basically in that
contiguous.
last,
The hatching, Bill, the hatching on that plan is the area that's already been reclaimed on that.
Yeah, but that hasn't changed in how many years?
That's reclaimed, that's
doesn't
already
matter.
seeded,
It's
it's never
already
gonna.
No,
seeded and
the
reclaimed.
non-reclaimed hasn't changed in how many years?
But it's not,
there's not a timeline on how
yeah, it's
long.
not
As long
over
as it's
5 contiguous
contiguously
acres.
used every year or two, then there's no set date.
I don't know what the acreage is of it, what we're looking at.
It's a 25-acre parcel, and we're in the last fifth of it,
The last 5 acres.
correct?
On portion on
Once
the
we
north
do,
portion.
once we
on-
do
I'm not trying
deplete
to
an
pick
area,
on you
we'll
guys.
loom it
This
up
is
and
what we're
seed it.
supposed to be doing. This is our duty, is to review this, and if we don't have that information,
Right.
it's hard to
Well, that's
review.
what our site walk is every 3 years.
You could have come out and joined us, but
I see your check boxes here, but I don't know how you checked them, because you didn't have the data to,
I
Say-
checked it from the 2003 plan. That's what we used. And we also reviewed the site to make sure that the explicit operational standards were in compliance with RSA 155E. And we came to the conclusion that they were.
Anybody else wanna look at those? That's the original plans.
how many more years are you expecting to?
It all depends on the economy, you know, if a lot of houses or a lot of commercial work, we can use the material quicker, we use it quicker, it's not a, it's like I can't guess a amount of time.
You
Yeah.
told me 10 to 15 years when we met out at the site. And it's in your application.
Right.
Doesn't
We don't
sound
have
like an
obviously a
excavation
set date,
operation.
but, you know, when it's, the area is used up, we're gonna reclaim it, you know, so we obviously want our money back someday, so it behooves us to stay up with our reclamation plan and keep moving, but, you know, I can't predict how many yards of sand we're gonna haul out every year with the economy and the COVID and all the other things that are going on. It kind of affects us.
But it really wouldn't be reclaimed if you're using it, the same area to bring in material or process material. So theoretically, it would never be reclaimed.
It'll have to be someday.
It has to be under state law
So,
and under our own regulations.
I guess that was Bill's question.
yeah, can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
And it may just be my misunderstanding, so they have to reclaim it, they're not removing material for 5 years, or over 5 acres, they have to reclaim it, their stuff, if they stop removing material from the site, native material.
Only if
Basically,
it's depleted.
Only if the site is depleted, and the site is not depleted.
Once the sand is depleted, then all the edges are gonna be
So just,
reclaimed and seeded and loomed, and then everything is stable again, and then we get our bond money back. So it behooves us to reclaim and to get the material out. We're just not there, and we can't predict.
There's no
You know,
minimum you have to remove
You
from
have
the
a 30 or 40 foot bank of sand. You know, how many yards you're gonna take out? I don't know. Depends on the workload you have and what's going on.
And in Diane, in theory, if they took out, not just them, anybody took out 1 cubic yard of sand a year and sold it, that qualifies as a gravel operation still.
Is that what
Yes,
you're
that's what I'm
asking?
asking, right?
That's the basic investment.
I don't, I'm,
Yeah,
in
I
all these
thought it
regulations,
had-
I've never
I thought
seen
you had to
anything.
reclaim it if it was over 5 acres that had been disturbed. Was my understanding.
Oh, yeah, I get that,
No,
there's a
which-
different
which is
question,
depleted.
which is depleted of
All the resources.
material.
Right.
Correct.
But,
If you never deplete it, and you just use it to bring in material and process material, you
You're
would never
asking me a
have to
legal
reclaim it.
question, and
Okay.
No, no,
I
I'm just
can't
saying our, in
answer
regards
right
to
now.
our ordinance,
yeah, that's fine.
our
I'm
regulation.
just following the protocol that we've followed for the last 15 years.
Right, the regulation has no minimum amount of excavation.
Regulation is
required.
basically if we abandon the pit and the town deems it, well, these guys haven't been there for
Abandoned,
2 or
right.
3 years, there's trees growing up in the road.
Right,
It's a safety hazard, we're gonna go in, use the bond money.
right.
We're gonna reclamate all the edges, make it a safe property.
Well, I guess maybe to answer your question, Bill's, the other part of that is, or any excavation from which earth materials of sufficient weight or volume to be commercially useful have not been removed over a 2-year period.
One more question, so all the rocks that are crushed there are from the site, we're not bringing any rocks from somewhere else and crushing
We're
there?
still crushing everything there's
Right there.
so much there, that we're still dealing with that.
It needs the regulation.
All right, so let's get back to the waiver request.
Can I have it over? Thank you. Here you go, Mr. Chairman. Sorry.
So the waiver request is to have the permit valid for 5 years instead of 3. Does anybody have any questions, concerns about that? Take them one at a time here. No concerns?
I'll make a motion.
Please.
We grant the waiver to extend from 3 to 5 years for renewal of their permit.
Is there a second?
Second,
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. That motion passes unanimously, 7-0. So now on to the extension. We've had a lot of discussion. I've actually learned some things. What's the flavor of the board?
Is it
I-
any link to the west development project that the town is discussing? Would that
That's
be
still an option.
Yeah.
The premise of that is that when the pits have reached their useful, end of their useful life, that would become a potential development site. And that, all the pieces were in place, and the zoning was changed, and we had a tax increment financing district in place to finance the cost of sewer, then, that project would be placed on the floor. And it's still on the books. Officially approved.
So, I guess I'll stop. Philosophically, I have no problem granting an extension. I think that one condition I would like to make, if we come up with a list of conditions, or there's just this one, is that this plan is withdrawn from the application and replaced with a plan. I guess you got to look at the regulation and just come up with a plan. And I don't know, 3 months, I don't know, or 6 months. It's going to be a while because people are busy. But I'm not comfortable with that plan being part of the package just because of the way it was done. And I know you guys don't know, you guys don't deal with that, so it's just something that, in my opinion, we should not be using as part of our decision-making process. But other than that, I really don't have any other comments. Like they're excavating. It looks to me like there's areas there that area there is bigger than 5 acres that hasn't been reclaimed. But I have no doubt that it hasn't been depleted of material and whatnot. So I have no issue with the operation continuing. What's the rest of the board think?
is it 3.02, just to get your conditions correct? Sorry, dyslexia.
And I don't think this makes it any harder. I just think it makes it different.
So, just to clarify, you'd be looking for unsurveyed sketch. Is that
Just-
what we're saying?
Read this.
3.01.
Read 3.01.
Okay.
It has a whole
Pen right
host of things.
there. 3.01.
3.01A.
Would this board be extending their current gravel pit permit until such time as that's submitted?
I think,
Because
to
if
me,
you discontinue it,
Yeah.
they may have to start all over from scratch.
yeah, and I don't want to
That's not the
cause that
intent.
issue. No. My thoughts would be to just have a conditional approval, pending submittal of whatever information or any materials that anybody wants. I think that's the appropriate way to,
Okay.
I don't know legally,
Would you have a
if we don't
timeframe?
approve it tonight, whether the permit expires, whether it can be renewed. I don't want to put them in that kind
I
of
wouldn't wanna
jeopardy.
do that either.
I don't think it's necessary for
Like
what's going on.
120 days,
what's going on. Yeah,
4 months.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Scott, any thoughts?
I'm happy to go in there. It looks like,
Tim?
Yeah, I agree. I'm fine with continuing on with just, I agree that the plan, just something about having blacked out, blacked out names and words on there that should be corrected. Just, and I'm glad Val brought up the regulations so that we know
Yeah.
what the basis of that is, and as long as we meet the regulation.
Yep. Mikhail? You good? Bill?
I'm all good.
Good?
All good as well.
Jane? Good? Val?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Oh, excuse me.
Just
Diane wants to say something.
Administratively, I need to know. We're gonna wait until we get the plan in 120 days before we extend the permit
No.
and sign
Nope.
it.
No, I'm gonna make a
Conditional.
motion.
Stay.
Okay, so we will
Okay.
extend it,
Right.
subject to that.
Yes.
At any time in the process, in the regulations, it says the planning board has the authority to negate, if you will, the issuance of the permit if it was due cause,
Sure.
reasonable cause. So that is something that the planning board would do.
Yeah, and
Okay.
yeah, I don't want to,
So I just want to know how administratively we want to handle it. Because we usually will have the hearing, it will be approved, and then we issue a brand new permit to them for the 3-year of the duration
Yep.
of the project.
yes.
So if you give them 4 months, come back with a plan, and they can't find someone to produce the plan for them within 4 months.
And ask for another extension.
Yeah, it's just it's a condition of the renewal, just like everything else Diane has put in here.
And,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I would also say that, I guess for clarity, that plan in a format that's acceptable to the town planner or
It's in the
whomever.
regs.
It is, okay. We don't need to say that then.
Okay. What about the other conditions that are recommended in my memo?
Yeah, can I make my
As
motion?
part of it?
Yep, go ahead.
Thanks. Okay. Make a motion that we grant the request for renewal of the excavation permit for the 24.4 acre property located at 421 Wadley Falls Road, subject to the 9 conditions as noted in the town planner's memo dated December 7th, 2021. And in addition thereto, condition 10 will be that the applicant provide a replacement plan from the renewal application that meets all the requirements of our regulation 3.01A within 120 days of expiration of the current permit.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank
Good luck.
Thank you.
Next is Seacoast Pool Plastering LLC / Robert McInnes. Public hearing for an application for site plan and special use permit to permit the proposed construction of a 6,000 square foot building consisting of 1,000 square feet of office space and 5,000 square feet for an equipment / construction storage warehouse. 2 existing lots will be combined and access will be from an existing paved driveway off of Route 152, which is Wadley Falls Road. The office warehouse is expected to consist of 3 employees, proposed paved driveway extension and 8 paved parking spaces, a proposed septic system and leach field, well and water line, and approximately 78,000 square feet of gravel parking for storage of trucks, trailers, containers, and equipment. The applicant is requesting a special use permit for a wetlands buffer disturbance for the proposed driveway extension for site access and minor grading near a small wetlands buffer area pursuant to section 32-155E of the zoning ordinance. A portion of the proposed building and site and drainage improvements, including a bioretention area, fall within the town's aquifer protection overlay district under section 32-153 of the zoning ordinance. The lots are located at 446 and 451 Wadley Falls Road, tax map R6, lots 50-7 and 50-8 in the B3 zone.
Mr. Chairman, I need
Yes.
to recuse myself.
Okay, all right. Mikkel, I'll point you to sit in on this. So we need to start with the application. Diane, do you have a recommendation as to whether the application is complete?
Yeah, at this point, the application is substantially complete. I reviewed it with the applicant. There were several items, and they got back to me with some revised plans. There are a couple of things that I feel are still missing, and I wanted to ask the applicant what the status of those were. We'd like to make sure that there's a wetland stamp and certification on the plan that shows the wetlands. We'd also like to see a detail of how your project is going to impact the wetland buffer. There's one area, so that it's clearly defined where that area is. And I think you have given us some volume information, so that's helpful. And the second item was primarily what it was. We did get a new existing conditions plan. ADA accessibility. You talked on the phone, John,
Yeah,
about.
we can add a note, if it wasn't added, we can certainly add it.
Okay.
The plans do show it, but we can add it.
Okay, so you're gonna add that. So with that, I would recommend that the board vote to accept the application as being substantially complete and ready for technical review.
Okay.
I just had one question on, as you were reading through that, did you list the address as 446 and 451 Wadley Falls Road?
446 and 451.
So all this is 446 and 450.
Good catch, it is 446 and 450.
Oh,
Okay.
good.
Yep.
Someone's actually listening.
Yeah,
Oh.
right?
All right, so we'll amend that. Good.
Attention to detail.
I'll change that on the page here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Alrighty, so, does anybody have any questions or comments on the application itself? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the application as complete.
Yep, I'll make a motion that we accept the application from Seacoast Pool Plastering as complete.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion on the application? Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the application say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously, 6-0. So now I'll open up the public hearing and welcome the applicant and representatives.
Can I pull this a little closer?
Yes, please. Just please introduce yourself and then you can walk through a presentation of what you're proposing, if you would,
Thank you.
please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. John Lorden with Ty and Bond here representing the applicant, Rob McGinnis. He's here today as well as his business partner, John Pacheco. We were before the board earlier this year for design review just to get some initial input. We've continued on with the design. I'll give you a quick overview again. It'll be a little similar to what we've heard before, but we are looking to combine two vacant lots into a single 8.4 acre lot. It is located in the B3 zoning district and also the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. What we're proposing is a 6,000 square foot building. It'll be 1,000 square feet of office space and 5,000 square feet of warehouse. And the warehouse inside there would be kind of cement, plaster. This is a Seacoast pool plaster business. So the cement, plaster, and other hardscape materials. The site itself, access is off of Wadley Falls Road via an existing driveway. There was a stub that was put in prior to these owners taking control of the property. That extends into the site up to the wetlands area. It does then continue on. We're proposing to extend that driveway into 8 parking spaces along the building. In that kind of the brownish area is about 78,000 square feet of gravel parking area. And that's proposed for storage for construction equipment and vehicles, trailers, storage containers, etc. From grading, the grade slopes from the top of the sheet as you're looking at it down, so that's west to east. There are a few pockets of wetlands, which I'll just point out quickly. So there are two pockets, and then it's sort of like a drainage swale that runs along the road underneath the driveway, and then it runs to a larger wetland system to the east, which is the bottom of the page. We are not proposing any wetland disturbance, but we are required to disturb some of the wetland buffer for driveway access, extending that in. So on the plan here, it might be a little hard to see because of the distance, but we've got a yellow line. That's permanent disturbance because we're putting a driveway in. There's a small amount of red around it, and that's just for a minimal amount of grading in that area, and that's just temporary disturbance. Along the pocket to the west, which is the top of the sheet, you can see some red with the stripes in it. That is also just for grading, so that would be temporary. I believe on your sheets on the grading plan that might be marked incorrectly as permanent, but it's just for grading, so that's considered temporary. On the low side of the page, we're proposing, and unfortunately this is the site plan, so we don't see it, but we are proposing a bioretention area with a sediment forebay. So that'll collect all our stormwater, which does meet the alteration of terrain, which is required for this project, their requirements. In terms of utilities, we're proposing overhead electric from Wadley Falls Road. Main reason for that is just to avoid the wetlands, not digging through them, so it would be overhead and avoiding all the wetlands. There'd be a propane tank on site for storage, a drilled well for water, and a septic system for a small office a small bathroom in the office. Lighting would be just a few wall packs above the two man doors and the overhead door. Those would be LED dark sky compliant. The list of permits that are required for this project, one is a DOT permit because we are in DOT District 6 jurisdiction. This is a very low traffic generator. There was an approval on this property in 2004 for Prue Oil. They were required to add an additional lane, turning lane into this. We're still waiting for comments back from DOT, but we're not expecting anywhere near that because we're not going to have anywhere near that type of traffic. As I stated before, this does require a DES alteration of terrain permit. That has been submitted. We're also waiting for comments on that. It also requires a septic system permit from DES. That has been submitted. We're waiting on comments. We've got some initial ones, but they can't approve that until the state approves the driveway permit and also the alteration of terrain permit. Under Newmarket's jurisdiction, we're required site review, as well as a special use permit for the disturbance within the wetland buffer. I did say it before, but again, there's no direct impact to the wetlands. It's just for the driveway and that grading around that other pocket of wetlands. Ideally, we'd be looking to phase this project. We've thrown around a couple different ideas to get some revenue generated. The first thing they'd like to do is clear some trees and get some storage on there, get some revenue, and then move forward potentially then with the building, the parking area, and then extending and increasing that parking area. That's everything I had to highlight. I'd be happy to take any questions as well as the applicant.
Great.
Thank you.
Question for clarification. You just mentioned get some revenue. This came up in the last time when there was kind of maybe a concept design review. So is the proposal that you would be leasing out spaces up here on phase 1 of the gravel parking area?
Yes.
Diane, I was gonna ask you about that. So when they were here last time, they asked if they could store some vehicles on the site. And what did we tell them?
We told them yes.
That was just for personal. That was
Their
Yeah,
own,
they-
for the owners of the site.
yes. Thank you for
I don't
clarification.
I don't think their intent is a permitted use under my read of the zoning.
No, it was an accessory use, an interim use, from what I understand.
Yes, that was just for the owners.
Just for the owners. No, but what,
there's one
again, to clarify, you made the comment to get some revenue. So it's my understanding you're looking to do phase 1 in order to lease out space in the gravel parking area.
With permission from the board, the next step would be,
Let me back up, no next step. My question is, your comment was to get some revenue. Are you intending to do phase 1 and then lease out parking spaces?
not parking spaces, but area within the gravel parking area.
Sorry,
Yes.
area, you are intending to lease out parking areas within the gravel spaces.
Yes.
I don't think that's a permitted use. I think they would need a variance to do that.
And that would be for boat storage or vehicle storage or something? along
Equipment
those
storage,
lines?
storage containers.
I understand, Diane, but if you look under the B3, it doesn't fall, there's no storage there. And there's warehousing, but they'd have to build an actual warehouse in order to then lease out spaces in the warehouse.
At the other site.
I understand,
That's
but
been
we're
going
not
on for
talking
12
about that
years.
site, we're talking about this site and this
We
zoning.
have precedence for it.
Then they could go to they could go get
They
to
didn't
the
get a
zoning
variance.
board.
They did get a variance.
My point is, I don't believe it's permitted use under the
We'll see
B3
what the
zone.
zoning administrator says.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add,
Excuse me, if you're
Yeah.
gonna speak, so just please come up and.
I'm Rob McGinnis, this is my business partner, John. So when we discussed this originally with Diane before we bought the property, and when we came before the board in January, we had this exact discussion, so
Correct.
nothing has changed, so if this is an issue now, it should have been an issue then. This
I-
shouldn't really be raised now
I
that we
think it
own
was
the
an
property
issue.
and have spent, $100,000 on this plan.
Yeah.
That's all that I would ask. I mean, we've tried to do everything and then some that, we've been asked to do.
Understood. So we, yeah, can I just
Well,
see you?
I- Sure.
Just please.
So that was my other question. So within the application, it also speaks to containers. So is this referring to like storage containers that are moved by vehicles?
Yes.
Like trailers.
Yes, you wouldn't be renting a
Yeah,
trailer.
this
Someone would
means,
bring the
this means trailers, construction equipment, right? You think about
Yeah.
every one of us in our neighborhood has construction workers who keep their machinery stored in the yard, right? You guys probably get calls about that all the time. We believe there's a huge demand for folks who have Connex boxes, trailers, construction equipment that sits in their yard and doesn't move for months at a time because they have nowhere to go. What we're proposing is that equipment would be stored on our site and we would have a rental agreement to put that on our site.
Well, that's certainly a big question, but, does anybody have any other questions or comments? Is this, you're the zoning administrator, right?
Yeah.
So it's
I'm
your,
the zoning administrator, and I believe that this does meet the intent of the B3 zone under the categories of wholesale and warehouse. And that's exactly the designation that was given to the site down the street, which is doing the same exact thing that was approved by the planning board. I don't know, it was probably 12 years ago at this point. So my take as the zoning administrator is that that would be an allowed use. But it is subject to a site plan review, and it needs to make sense, and it has to be clearly laid out and, a functional space going forward. I don't see how we can not allow it in one area of the B3 zone and allow it in the second area. Vice versa.
well,
So that's my determination.
May I ask one quick question? When we talk about storage containers, are there any limitations on what can actually be in the storage containers? I'm thinking chemicals.
When we did the site review before, we asked the applicant to give us a list of the materials that would be stored to assure that they wouldn't fall into that category of hazardous materials or waste or what have you.
Just
And,
to be clear though, they did specifically say they wanted to rent space. I remember that in the open
Right.
thing.
And-
But
and there's
we
no-
asked them what was gonna be in this building,
right, and
and they said there was gonna be no chemicals. in it.
right.
What Jane is asking is, they're renting space.
I know
to-
exactly what you've asked.
Okay.
They're renting storage trailers, and what's gonna be in the storage trailers.
Yeah.
And a very legitimate question as part of our site plan review authority is to ask, what are you gonna store in those trailers?
Right, so they would
And
have
give
to
us a list
somehow
of
be
the
included.
materials and make sure that that's clearly vetted and review to make sure there aren't any hazardous materials or ice. I know that was a concern when we did the other
Yeah, I
application
think that's-
several years ago.
Thank you.
All right, so we've had the overview. A few questions. Typically, we'd send this out, set up a TRC and send this out for review,
Right.
right?
And we have received a proposal from Underwood Engineers. I've shared that with Mr. Lorden, sorry. And, as soon, and you have a check here, there you go. So once we deposit this, I need to get the town manager to sign the agreement. I don't think that's gonna be a problem, but we will, schedule it for a TRC. So maybe the next item on business is to set up a TRC to review it.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna suggest, we have to go through that process, right? So,
Yep.
does anybody wanna volunteer for a TRC?
What time schedule do you do?
We try to do it during early in the day, during the workday, to allow the public works director and water and sewer, not in this case water and sewer, but the other department heads to be able to fit it into their schedules. So we
Yeah,
usually
how
try
far
for a,
out? How many weeks?
well,
out?
we have a holiday in the middle of all this, and
Right.
so I was hoping that we would get some kind of a letter maybe from Underwood, maybe after the first of the year, and that we could schedule it at that point, once I can get everybody on board. It's really hard to schedule
Yeah.
meetings with people during the holiday season.
Yeah, that was my concern.
Probably
Yeah.
probably a month
So
from now.
maybe a month from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, 15 days, the 15th of January, so does that work for you, John? And Rich?
Yeah, we understand it's based on Underwood's schedule.
Yeah, yeah.
And they also expressed interest in knowing what that would be, so they could do their workload analysis.
Sure,
and
understood, yeah,
it-
absolutely.
With the holidays, people are taking
Yep.
vacation time and that kind of thing.
Okay, so I would volunteer to be on the TRC.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
Anybody else wanna volunteer to be on it?
So we wouldn't be meeting until January.
No.
I'll volunteer.
Valerie, Jane?
Yes, please.
All right, our meeting in January is usually later in the month, right?
It's at
Yes,
end
the
of month.
27th
It's the third
or
or
the
fourth,
28th.
right?
I have my calendar.
Just-
So it'd be the 25th.
All right. So there is a chance then that we could have something productive at that meeting, if the
could.
TRC can meet and
Well, I
whatnot,
guess
so,
It always depends on what the issues are and are they resolvable in that time frame, and can we reach consensus, but yeah, that would be a reasonable
so I mean,
timeframe, I would think.
I always prefer to continue to the next available meeting, and then if we don't meet the schedule, we just continue it again.
That's our preference as
Just
well.
send us a letter or an email or something.
Or at least would give you a chance after the TRC meeting to deal with the waivers. So
Right.
then if you can get the waivers out of the way, that would, help you out.
Right.
And they have provided the list of waivers,
Yes.
there's 7 of them.
Yep.
I think one of them has fallen by the wayside, because there's not gonna be lighting, other than the security lighting that you pointed out.
Around the building,
Right.
and we do have building elevations as well.
Oh, okay, good.
Do we need a waiver for underground utilities?
Yeah, that's a good point, Val.
Can we just confirm whether or not they do need one to
Pretty
give them an
sure
opportunity
that all of
for
our
that?
commercial sites, business sites, are supposed to have underground utilities. Electric, underground electric utilities.
Just check,
Yeah.
Just
maybe
check
another
the-
waiver you
I
need.
just, I remember we had a long discussion for Pelzar, and we were going
Exactly.
overhead, we went underground.
Part of the way.
Part of the way.
from what I
Part of the way.
remember, yeah.
And gave
Right.
them the waiver
Yes.
to go over.
Right.
Right.
We'll
Yep.
double check the language in the ordinance and see if we can get
Alrighty, I think that takes care of everything we need to do, except for continuous.
that.
I'll entertain a motion to continue to January 25th meeting.
So move.
Is there a second? Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll see you in about a month.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right, next on the agenda is updating stormwater regulations under site plan and subdivision regulations work session with Bill Archery, from VHB Consultants. Welcome, Bill. I don't know how much time everybody has had to look into the drafts that Diane has sent out. I've read them, and there's certainly a lot of information there. So what I would like to do, if the board is okay with this tonight, is to have Bill give us a presentation on, maybe some of the highlights of what the changes are, proposed changes. I think the appropriate way then to do this would be to set up a TRC. There's a lot of information here to go through, go through the details, and then come back with a recommendation to the board, just like a site plan type of thing. I think it would be very cumbersome to sit here. It would be several nights to go through all these regulations and all the changes and whatnot. So, before we start, what's the board think of that general concept of the approach?
I think it makes perfect sense. Is there a way to tell, we went over this in pretty good detail, was it a year ago?
Yeah,
Years ago.
2 years ago.
2018,
And there's a lot of
2019.
changes.
Since, okay.
Yeah.
I have no question.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. All right, so, welcome, Mr. Cherry. If you would, walk us through, we'll try to keep detailed questions to a minimum. There might be some big picture questions. But I'd like to have you start by just letting the board know what the impetus is behind of this. It's the MS4 permit, in my understanding. So if you could just explain that to start off, that would be a good starting point.
Okay, great. Good evening. I think I know most of you on the board, or after you. For those who don't know me, I'm Bill Archery, resident in town. I'm a senior water resource specialist with VHB Engineering. Stormwater management is where I focus is my career. I have helped other communities update their stormwater regulations. I was on the committee, the subcommittee that helped start this update 3 years ago, 2018, or early 17.
2017.
Yeah. So there's a long history here, and we had the delay, and now we're back. So what we're trying to accomplish here, what it started was the MS4 permit that came out in 2017 by EPA that regulates municipalities in an urbanized area. And one of the requirements of that permit was to update your local regulations to include additional stormwater treatment requirements that were referenced in the permit, essentially to model the Southeast Watershed Alliance regulations. So that came in 2017. The permit became effective in 2018, and you had 3 years after that to update. And so technically it was this past June, but I don't know if you got another year because you're a new permittee. But
I question that, but I don't think that was part of the modifications to the permit. So we want to hopefully move this forward quickly so that we're
Yeah.
not going to problems.
True enough. So, key things of the permit, the disturbance threshold in the MS4 permit is any project that disturbs more than 40,000 square feet of area is the trigger threshold in the MS4 permit. Most communities have gone lower than that. Your current regulations say 20,000 square feet disturbance or adding 5,000 square feet of impervious area triggers stormwater regulations. So, just want to point that out, that the MS4 is 40,000, but most communities are going less because more projects are, smaller projects than the larger projects. The other key thing is there are different standards for new development and redevelopment. And the permit defines what new development is and what redevelopment is. New development is any new land, undeveloped land being developed, or any land that currently has less than 40% impervious area of the parcel is considered new development, and that's a higher treatment standard than redevelopment. So redevelopment is any proposed project that is currently developed and has more than 40% of its parcel as impervious area, and it's a lesser treatment standard. So what are the treatment standards? So treatment standards are, for water quality purposes, I'm not talking about peak flow control and groundwater recharge and all those things, but for water quality purposes, for new development is to treat the proposed impervious area, have sufficient BMPs to achieve 80% total suspended solids removal and 50% total phosphorus and nitrogen removal. And those percentages, those removal efficiencies, come out of the New Hampshire DES Stormwater manual that has rated efficiencies for different types of BMPs.
Can I interrupt a point, Zach? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe those are the same percentages that are in our current regulations.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. It is. So you have the same thing right now in your current
Yeah,
regulation,
okay.
80 and 50%.
Yep, okay.
So redevelopment, it changes, the removal efficiencies go away. They basically need to treat at least 30% of the existing pavement and at least 50% of the newly generated pavement. And or you could treat 50% of the entire parcel, which is a little confusing, but that's the minimum thresholds. So yeah, just for the permit, it had to be a little more confusing. That originally the permit did have those same removal efficiencies for redevelopment, and then when it went through the modifications in 2020, it went to this 30% of existing pavement and 50% of new pavement, which comes out of the model regs of Southeast Watershed Alliance. Now those numbers, I've seen communities use, higher numbers or different numbers. Well, you got to use the minimum, but I've seen communities use 30% of existing and then 100% of new. It's your choice of where you want to land with it. That's the basic concepts of what's changing. I miss anything?
Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
I just thought of it, yes. Would you, for the members here that don't know and for people watching at home, would you explain what the MS4 is? We started talking about MS4 without really saying what it is.
Yeah.
And also, could you just explain briefly, if possible, what areas are impacted by that, right? Because my understanding is that, like, southern New Hampshire is impacted, northern New Hampshire, certain areas are not. Can you just kind of give a brief overview of that so people can understand that?
Sure. Yeah, so the MS4 permit, which stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Systems, again, issued by EPA, issued for New Hampshire and Massachusetts, two states that don't have their own delegated authority to have their own permits. and it's targeted towards communities that are considered the urbanized area, which is based on a census population amount, and extends up from Boston all the way up through Rochester to Milton, to Manchester, all the way to Wilton, and the west down to Nashua in New Hampshire. So there's like 60-something communities in that area that are regulated by this permit. So it's a general permit. There's a notice of intent, and there's various plans that have to be developed, a stormwater management plan, an illicit discharge detection plan, a operations and maintenance plan, and then there's these regulation updates that have to be done. And it's a 5-year permit, expires in 2023. There'll be a new permit. And interesting enough, I mean, Newmarket, not the entire town is in the MS4.
I was gonna ask you that.
Yeah.
I
So-
wanted to mention that we have a website on the town's website for stormwater management, and there's copies of the notice of intent that Bill is referring to, there's copies of maps, the various components of the program, and
Right.
detailed information on public education. And we try to do public outreach, that's one of the requirements of the program, so that we educate the public what this means and
Right.
how this will affect homeowners in the community. So any members of the public that are listening tonight, you're more than welcome to go to our website and get as much information. Also, the stormwater management plan that Bill mentioned is on there. And we are in year 4 now, so we've done 3 annual reports, and that can give you an idea of the flavor of what the program is for Newmarket. And it doesn't include the entire town, but it's pretty much the urban core area and the coastal portions of it.
Yes, so some questions, Bill. So, in regards, actually, I read the 2020 report, might be a typo in there, Diane. The planning board is only responsible for 2.35 and 2.36, correct? Those portions of the permit regulation.
Yep.
And as you just stated, it's not the whole town that is impacted.
That's right.
And then under the permit, it seems like Newmarket falls in a grouping of 21 towns, including Newmarket, that are regulated by the nitrogen and TDS. We don't fall under chlorides. Okay?
Right.
So
That's
I look
correct.
at that. So in regards to the 20 other towns that are required under the MS4 program to provide their updated regulations, how many, do you know of any other towns that have, within those other 20, have updated their actual site plans and subdivision regulations?
Quite a few. I don't know
Yeah,
out of
there
that
was,
20, but quite a few have already.
I sent some information to, I think it was one of our members who asked about it. There was a survey that was done, regional planning commissions, that was done back, 2015, but it actually shows the communities that are in the program in our region and the status, whether they've adopted the regulations or not, or if they're fully in the program or just partially, whatever. So I can get that information out. I don't think it's been updated since 2015.
So that would be kind of,
Yeah,
that would
be-
updated.
But there are several communities that fall into this. Newmarket is fairly new to the program. The program has been in effect since 2003, and Newmarket and Rollinsford, there are a couple of communities that just recently became part of the MS4 program because we're part of now a statistical area that's in excess of 100,000 population.
Rollinsford just did some minor amendments to their existing regs because they sent them to the state to review, and they were fairly much in compliance, with the exception of a couple of elements.
And I think the regional
So-
planning commission's been working with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
most of the bigger communities, I did assist Portsmouth,
Dover.
Rochester, Dover is done, Exeter is done. Stratham, I think, is done. I think they've recently done, but smaller town, I don't think Greenland,
Have any of the towns done them as almost like an overlay district, so that the particular regulations only apply to the MS4 bounded areas, the regulated areas.
I don't know that it's occurred. I mean, you have that prerogative. You could do it as a tiered, this apply to only the MS4 area and a different set of requirements outside of it. You could structure this with minimum requirements for a certain disturbance, and you could have enhanced requirements, for a higher disturbance, up towards 40,000 square foot.
Or
The-
those that are directly connected to the stormwater systems.
Right,
Yeah, because of the velocity.
right.
It's some interesting, believe me, a lot of work into this, really appreciate it. But as you delve into, as Diane probably has, I'm sure, there's different ways to kind of approach it for sure, as
So,
to what
y-
levels.
Right. So actually, the current drafts that you have of the updates, there's a lower disturbance threshold in that, right? There's
There-
5,000 square feet.
5,000 and 2,500 if it's adjacent, within 100 feet of a
Right.
wildlife or a stream or brook.
Right.
And that was something that had been recommended by the Conservation Commission representative on the committee when we started this way back.
Yeah, but it would be, it begs the question, you could be 100 feet from that water body, but if you're connected to the municipal system, you could be, having runoffs get into that particular water body a lot faster and with less treatment than the 100-foot buffer, away from it, right? Because it's
Yeah,
just going
yeah.
into a pipe and it's going out,
Yep,
right?
that's true.
So I guess, that's what I'm saying. You really need, what are the unintended consequences of some of the differences? I spent a lot of time on this, and it would almost be, I think a lot of times if you just look at it, you start going through it, and you feel like it's really cumbersome, and there's a lot of information, but there's just so much redundancy, particularly when you look at site plan and regulations. It lends itself to come up from a copy format, right, as to can it be better presented within the written ordinance so that it doesn't appear to be so redundant or so overwhelming and not repetitive. I think that a lot of it is because it's very repetitive.
So what you're asking is, saying is that, so there's a new stormwater regulation proposal for subdivision and a different one for
That's how it's been
site plan,
presented.
which is how our
Yeah.
current standards are set up.
Because
That's
we have
Correct.
two different jurisdictions. That's why we have two different sets.
what do you mean two different?
Yeah.
We have a subdivision ordinance
Oh,
that comes into place,
Right.
and we have a site review ordinance. So the
Well,
changes-
regulation.
Yes.
The changes have to be made to both sets of regulations.
I get that, I understand that at this point, but I guess she's asking,
Right.
Val, the bigger question is, can we reference in those things, have one
Yeah,
stormwater regulation?
it can just be,
And
yeah,
reference
exactly.
for both.
We decided as a committee to go with the second,
Yeah.
because in some communities, it's actually stormwater ordinance.
Right.
It's
Right.
passed by the town council.
Right.
Mhm.
And we decided many years ago, I think Eric, you were in the first
Yeah.
meeting
Oh, absolutely.
in 2010, that we said, let's stick with what we have jurisdiction
Yeah.
over, which is site review and subdivision.
Right.
And that's why it's structured the way it is.
Oh, I'm not questioning how it's structured, I think Val's
But we also have the
point
ability
is
to.
there to make it better. That's the point.
Correct.
It's a lot better than it was
Yeah.
before.
And under the RSA, we can have a stormwater regulation.
Right.
So in fact, we don't have to separate out the site plan or subdivision. It's a stormwater regulation, which would be easy to do because Diane has them all, cut and pasted here to begin with.
Well, I think that's.
I think so, I would think the committee could look at that.
I think that would be something the committee would look at, I agree, it's
Yeah.
nothing we're gonna resolve here when we talk
Yeah.
about it, but, I'm sorry, I guess I got you off track, Bill, I'm sorry.
I don't know, these are all,
So-
key discussions that we.
So I didn't think, Val, I don't think you brought up, I didn't think is, should this be portrayed as an overlay even, and not relative to the areas of town that aren't subject to MS4?
And that's why you really do it more as a separate regulation.
We already have it townwide, so I think the idea was that we would be consistent with what we have in place currently rather than
Understood.
reinvent the wheel.
Understood. Bill, one other kind of big picture question is, I mean, this is all, MS4 is a municipal system. And this doesn't pertain directly to this, but what additional efforts are required on the town's part to check on compliance and whatnot?
Regarding BMPs?
Yeah,
stormwater
regarding
treatment?
BMPs and even regarding existing structures. So if somebody wants to redevelop something downtown and tie into the stormwater system down there, does that force the town to look at that system and see if it's in compliance now or upgraded or?
Public works?
The public works, we do that. I mean, if there's a situation where you have a storm drain that doesn't have capacity, then he's gonna say, no, you can't tie into that storm drain.
I agree, but what if it has capacity, but it's not, it's polluting the river, it's flowing right into the river?
Well, so you have your treatment standards.
Yes.
Watch out. So, and then you have your BMPs that be constructed, best management practices. There is a requirement to ensure that long-term maintenance of those BMPs is being done. So this is a gray area, and not many communities have really developed some. I mean, there's language in regulations, maintain, submit an inspection maintenance plan with the BMPs at the time of approval. Who's gonna do it, who's the responsible party, how often you're gonna do it, and usually there's some reporting thing, either document it and have it available on request or submit it annually. And this is a big thing that communities are now wrestling with. What does it mean to be ensuring a long-term maintenance? And the interpretation is you gotta be checking on these things, that you gotta have some form of documentation, and whether annual submittal or you're going out and asking them to show the documentation.
The way the ordinance is structured now, each developer would be required to submit an annual report to the planning department in June. And that data would be used to help track where we are with the enforcement of the regulations. And we need to document all of that for EPA, and they'll be looking for that in our annual report. So there is some additional administrative responsibilities on the town. And one of the things, this year, there's a proposal to bring in a part-time, or not part-time, but a full-time town engineer to help set up these protocols of the system so that we will be in compliance in the future. But there's also a responsibility that we go out and do testing, and we identify hotspots, if you will, priority areas, and we have an obligation to prioritize them and develop plans in the later years of the program to be able to address those so-called hotspots where there might be potential pollution going into the MS4.
That's all the noted red,
And that's-
yellow dots.
We've identified,
That the town's responsible for
Those are our-
just working with Rick Malasky. So for instance, he needs to be able, there's 2 outflows at Moody Point. I'm just using it as an example that have to be inspected every year by the town.
well, I don't know about
Well,
the
yeah, I mean,
town,
there is,
Yeah, they're
well, the
outflows, but
town
they're-
probably
they're
has its own
town
treatment
culverts.
BMPs too.
Right.
Grass swales, whatever, I mean, all of those things need to be inspected.
One of the
maintained.
requirements in the permit is that we have a map where we show all
Yep.
the town outfalls, and we finished that this June. And then the next step is, okay, what do we know about these outfalls, and are they priority for testing? We had to actually go out and do field testing, water quality analysis. to
This is
be
the
able
illicit
to
discharge detection
identify any
piece.
potential pollution spots. And then the next step is, okay, what are you gonna do to remediate it? And,
So,
the expectation is the town will take responsibility for those things and will move forward with some remediation plans.
So back to the planning board role here. The, on using as an example, and then going through the proposed, regulation changes. Let's take like a development, I'm gonna use the development, like the golf course development, the houses. And if BMPs were required under that, which would have been today,
They were.
and they would have been, so they were under our stormwater regs, but additional BMPs would have been required on individual lots in order to meet these regulations.
We don't,
So-
we don't look at individual lots.
So then, we don't look at an individual lots. You're only saying the road infrastructure and the BMPs associated with the runoff.
With the subdivision,
the
that's why it comes
subdivision
in
itself.
under the subdivision.
So if you look at that, the developer's long gone. Who is really filing those reports after they're sold out?
This is the problem with why it hasn't been done.
Yeah,
It,
there's one town I know who it's Hampton. Every year, December 1st, we get a bunch of letters like this saying, we need to see your inspection reports, and we reply to them,
Who's paying?
nobody's hired us to do the inspections. You know, which is ultimately the problem.
Yeah,
Well, and that's why in some of our projects that we've approved, we've had a maintenance component. This Eric DeWitt project, I mean, he's technically, in his developer's agreement, he has agreed to do certain maintenance of the systems and reporting it to the town. Project hasn't been completed yet,
Yeah.
but it is designed so that the owner, the property
But
owner.
that's easy. That's a site plan, and
Right.
that
I realize that.
individual owner,
Then it would be
but
the
you get
the
into subdivision.
Homeowners association.
But there are some instances where there's not a homeowners association. Mostly, especially if they're not choosing to do
yeah,
an open
it's
space.
an issue. You know, I don't know if the homeowner's got to hire somebody, you know, as part of their fees.
Well, it seems that under the regulation, it would be reported under the deed,
Right,
the notice.
yes, that's a key
Notice it.
piece of it. It's that it's recorded in the deed. Yeah, so this is a hot topic. It's an issue that, in fact, the Seacoast Stormwater Coalition is developing a guidance manual. We get a presentation tomorrow at the meeting that will help develop this guidance manual, which is kind of laying out the key pieces of an I&M plan and providing some templates of how to outreach to property owners, the annual reform, and things like that. But it really takes more coordination at the approval process. You know, when the site plan is approved, that the I&M plan is you know, satisfactory and has all the components and, you know, names the responsible parties. So that gets lost sometimes, you know, at the time of approval, and who's following up later. Is it DPW? Is it planning? Is it, you know?
Yeah, it would almost be that every subdivision, even just a standard subdivision, has to have a homeowners association just for stormwater management in the future. Go ahead, Bill, I'm sorry.
Although the town accepts the road for maintenance,
Right.
they own it.
And the road, but
And
they
the
may
road
not.
is what
Less-
the situation that caused the stormwater.
I thought there was something in here though that gave the responsibility, you had to look at the individual lots. too.
Correct.
I
When you
thought
not-
there was a
Not
case of
in
that.
these regulations, there's another piece of this, which is for any lot under 1 acre, whether it's single family or not, where they still have to do construction, erosion control measures, and that's something that doesn't necessarily come under the planning board, but would come under the building official.
Yeah,
And
well,
that's another piece of what's required under the permit.
so,
I think there's a
let me
lot
just,
the committee will look
yeah,
at.
let me just, I guess, backtrack a little bit here, and I think I myself have gotten off track a little bit. We're supposed to be talking about big picture stuff. Does anybody have any questions for Bill? Like I understand more what the whole process is here. Does anybody have any big picture questions about moving forward? Go ahead.
Question, so in the future, do you expect more changes for the permit? What's the next 5 years? So there'll be more changes to our regulation?
Yeah, then
Well, has any of this applied to, not at the subdivision and site plan regulation level for new development, but more so for reconstruction at the building permit level?
No, you know, you need to, it usually has to come through site plan. It usually is the first trigger that it's subject to site plan approval.
For existing projects?
For-
though?
Yeah, so not,
It's not being driven by any residential projects or?
no. It's usually a project that's subject to site plan approval and then over a certain threshold of disturbance. So, no, hasn't applied to single family or I'm trying to say revitalization.
Building rehab.
Restoration,
Yeah.
I guess. The key thing, the biggest change here, since you already said, those removal efficiencies are already in the current rates. The biggest thing is redevelopment here. Because, in the past, traditionally, applicants come in and say, well, I'm not changing anything, so why would I need to do anything? And you've heard it all. So this is changing things. For now, something has to be done with existing pavement and new pavement. So that's really, the biggest thing that people getting their hand around. What you decide as disturbance threshold, whether you tier it as minimum levels, enhanced levels, those are all subject things that we can discuss,
Bill, did you have a comment? Did you raise your hand?
So, I may have misunderstood, but I think I heard that the threshold's proposed is 5,000 square feet?
For site plan review.
Not for subdivision.
No, that's.
Well,
It's for major
so
subdivisions.
subdivisions
Well, I
have their
changed-
own
we changed that
applicability
now, 'cause
threshold.
It doesn't comply with the permit.
So
So it's
Newmarket is a
now-
little, because you do have the subdivision, you do have the site plan, and there are different triggering
triggers.
thresholds,
We
but then the
usually get
the
major
standards are the
Did
same
it change from 12 to?
once you get through the,
That's what I reviewed.
So a 3-unit residential
actual ordinance
building, which is
quote,
site plan.
The date.
I reviewed the comparative charts,
Okay,
so that's changed.
it's now based.
On acreage? Yeah.
Well, no, it really applies to all subdivisions, not just major.
Right.
And it's more problematic and more detailed if you have a road that's being constructed. But the threshold of the 40,000 square feet could apply to a subdivision that's 40,000 square feet.
So subdivision, 40,000, site plan, 5,000.
The actual regulation is any disturbance greater or equal to 1 acre. That's the MS4
Yes, but
regulation.
we're suggesting,
Or something
Yeah.
more
more
restrictive.
stringent.
Right.
Correct.
Yes,
and it's, right now, what we're proposing is 5,000 for site plan and 40,000 for subdivision.
No, I think it's any major subdivision regardless
changed it.
of the.
We changed it
okay.
because you might have a minor subdivision that's over the threshold, it's over 40,000, It's over
minor's
40,000.
under 6 lots.
Yeah, but we,
Yeah.
it
Okay.
also makes it very complicated when you start adding all these brand new ones.
Oh, absolutely. The devil's
So,
always in the
okay,
details.
so the way it's written now, and this is the 12/2/21 version,
Uh-huh.
okay. On paragraph C, minimum threshold, stormwater regulations apply to all subdivisions, whether new or redevelopment, as defined in the regulation, that disturbs a minimum of 1 or more acres. And that's the threshold that EPA has given us.
Right.
Okay, so that's
Okay.
why we changed it from the 6-unit business and trying to break out minor and
Okay.
major. So that we simplify it and also so that it would be compliant
Yeah,
with
so-
regulation.
Just so I'm clear, Diane. The 12-2 matrix was actually changed in the Word document.
Yes.
Okay.
But the Word document really is overriding.
Yeah, no, I
This is
understand.
just to
I
show
understand.
people
I
what
was
the
using the
differences are.
matrix. I was reviewing the
Okay,
matrix.
And I thought, I went through painstakingly.
Yeah, this was great.
Through every
Yeah.
single piece.
Yes.
Yeah, but it was easier to use the,
And thank you for doing
Matrix.
that, by the way.
Yeah,
I know that
well,
wasn't easy.
It took
All right.
forever,
I know it wasn't
especially
easy.
with this Excel
Okay.
spreadsheet format.
Right.
Excuse me.
I have a question if you can
Sure.
So, do most subdivisions also have to go through site plan review?
No.
No, it's separate.
No,
No.
separate.
Site plan review is, commercial or 3-unit or more residential.
Nothing to do with subdivision of land.
But if they're
Site plan
developing on
has
that
nothing to
land,
do with
Yes.
subdivision
Yes.
of land.
You're
if they,
correct.
if they were developing on that land, putting in new homes, they'd also have to go through site
Oh,
plan.
only subdivision.
Only
So
subdivision,
Only
you-
subdivision?
Yeah,
not site plan review.
you don't trigger site plan review unless it's commercial or 3-unit or more.
Three residential.
3 residential unit or more building.
Okay,
And that's under the state.
all right. I was trying to piece together if you was coming up with a conflict of this 5,000 square feet and 40,000, whatever.
No, if it was
That's,
5,000 on the subdivision,
That'd be a
then
problem.
That would be a
That'd
problem.
be a
That's all,
problem.
that's the only reason I was asking the question.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it makes more sense in taking it out of the realm of major versus minor, because that just adds another
Yep.
complication. But I don't think it's necessary.
Another reason
So-
that you just have it separate. But
Does
we'll
it-
talk about it.
Yeah,
later.
does anybody have any more questions for Bill? I guess we're beginning to get into the
I
weeds
just have
here.
a,
Go ahead.
I have
Go
a,
ahead, Val.
I do have a question. Did you really do all this pro bono for us? Because I would like to thank you immensely.
Yeah, I've forgotten about it all. I mean, it
thought-
was the year,
It's been
2017.
since 2018. I went back in the old stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
you're welcome.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your service to the
But
town,
he's-
past
he's
and
no
current.
longer pro bono.
Yeah.
I don't- just, you know,
But let's get him home. Get out of this meeting. I just gotta, who wants to pay our tax bills?
yeah.
All right, so
Um,
mention,
So, does anybody have any other questions for Bill? We tried to, we got a little bit into the weeds there more than I wanted, but it lends itself to that type of discussion. Oh, no, that's fine, it was all of us. If there is nothing else, I would,
You said so.
see if we can set up a subcommittee to review this.
January?
I think January sometime. So, I would love to be part of this, but I would have to zoom in or something.
Well, if we don't have a quorum, we don't have to call it. I'm sorry, if we have 3 members or less here, then it doesn't, it's not subject to the right to
Right,
know. So
right.
we can do something.
As long as everybody else is comfortable with that, I won't be sitting there. Okay, I will volunteer.
Three.
Three,
3 members.
less than a quorum, so. All right. Me, Val, and Jeff, unless somebody else wants to step up. I mean, I won't lose any sleep if I'm not on it. All right, awesome.
all right, thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much, Bill. Appreciate it.
Have a good holiday if I don't see you.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is follow-up of November 8th, 2021 correspondence from Town Council requesting the planning board to review current accessory dwelling unit regulations.
Can I report on that?
Sure, yes, please.
So I had recommended from Diane that we basically come up with, again, whether it's committee or, a matrix for the planning board to review, what we have in our ADU and what some of the neighboring towns have. We could, and which is kind of where this all started back, how many years ago now? 15 or so. And then we present that at the February meeting. It will be fairly easy to do, because the ADU regulations for towns is pretty straightforward. Oh, you have? Okay, good.
Well, it's not in a matrix form, but I started looking at different communities, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty standard because it's like,
So every town
here are the
has to allow-
components.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every town has to have one, and then it's just, does it have to be attached? Do they have attached, detached? What's the threshold? Do they have a density issue? Et cetera.
So far, most communities allow the detached as
They
well
do.
as the attached. Detached and
Yeah.
So Diane, when we talk about communities, are we talking about abutting or like size?
I'm looking right
I
now
would do
just
the
at a
seacoast.
regional, I mean,
Okay,
I
let me
looked
try
at
and-
Make it
Durham,
regional.
Exeter, Farmington, because
Yeah.
they recently worked on theirs, I've looked at Stratham's. I mean, the committee can choose what communities,
Yeah,
but
no,
I
I
just
was
wanted
just
to get some
curious.
comparisons, and,
Yeah.
but a lot of them are, different. For the most part, though, it's both attached and detached.
If you already started it, you just wanna work on together and not have a separate
Sure.
committee and then just send it
Yeah.
out to the board before the February
Yeah, If
meeting?
you'd like to work together on that,
Okay.
Val, I'd be happy to do
Perfect.
that.
Cause I have a lot of that already.
Yep.
Okay, and then we'll go on to the next one, which is discussion of planning board's review of housing and land use chapters of the master plan and possible zoning changes to permitted uses and density regulations in the residential districts and changes to current B1 zoning along North Main Street corridor in order to allow opportunities for mixed-use, commercial/residential development.
Okay, so I asked Diane again to put this on the agenda. I think that we should table any of the housing-related items, I mean, other than obviously the ADU above, until the regional planning commissions complete their assessment. They're doing a full assessment, within, I'm assuming Stratford and well, through the state.
You're
to
getting
do-
funding from the
yeah,
state, but.
To do this whole assessment, before we jump into it. Okay?
Okay,
So that would be,
I'm fine with
you
that.
know, and then, but I do think that we should really look at, as a board, moving forward with the extension of the M2A zone and any amendments we want to make to the current ordinance, and extending that up onto the North Gateway. I think there's no reason to, to wait on that at this point in time. It's low-hanging fruit. I think we have, on a couple of the site plan review applications that we've approved or gone through, we know what kind of impediments that there have been on the M2A current ordinance that we might want to address and change. And then but again, I don't see where there'd be any reason to not have the same zone on one end of the downtown versus the other end. And that is also consistent with the gateway, project that the council had put forward.
So what do you think the process is for starting that?
Again, I think Diane is willing to work on that and to be able to, kind of highlight some of the areas of the existing ordinance. I mean, the ordinance is less than a page long,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
And then also Diane can counsel us on how we actually do the rezoning of a specific section. And we already have all of the background of, I had that whole report done for all the properties within that proposed zone when we had gone to the council the last time.
Did we include in that the larger area
Nope.
on the north side? And that
We
was,
only included properties abutting 108.
yeah, we
is-
went out there to the, did we go out
To the
to
town
the
line.
Durham town line?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because we were looking at the redevelopment all the way
Yep.
up to the Houghton's buildings at the time.
But I have the
Overshot.
ordinances, I mean, this was a specific ordinance that we looked at back in 2000.
It would probably be good for
It was
for
like
this.
2011.
Yeah, so it'd be
and
good
we
for this.
dismissed it, but we can bring that back, I guess.
I was
is
gonna
where I'm
say,
going.
have this board see what the last board proposed.
Yep.
And then what the council at that time changed.
Well, okay.
Well, no, I mean,
Well, it's fair.
basically, the current ordinance is what will reflect what was changed. And then do we try to go through with the prior planning board recommendation to the current council?
Okay, good. So is that something you
Yeah.
send out to everybody?
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
send that out to everyone.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Valerie has, said she wanted to take this up at the January meeting, so I'll do my best to get a draft. May not be perfect, and it may,
fine.
warrant discussion, but
Fine.
it's always the first step.
Okay. Gotta start somewhere.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Thank you, Val and Diane. Chairman's report, I've got nothing. Committee reports, anybody, any committee reports? Nothing? Planners report, anything else? Diane? No. Jane, I would like a motion.
And all have a nice holiday. And have a nice holiday.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Thank you all.